All right, so you're here because you want to get under the hood of what makes some brands just
Okay.
understand how they connect so deeply without wading through tons of, dense marketing theory.
Exactly.
Today, we're cutting straight to it. We are diving deep into archetypal branding, mostly pulling from Margaret Mark and Carol S. Pearson's book, The Hero and the Outlaw.
hmm
Think of this as like a shortcut to understanding these really powerful, universal stories and how smart brands use them to connect.
Yeah, it's a fantastic framework. Archetypal branding, at its core, is really about deliberately using these timeless human patterns. The quest for freedom, wanting to belong, seeking change, and weaving them into your brand's story and personality.
So tapping into something already there, basically.
Exactly. Something deep in our collective psychology. It helps build brands that just feel familiar, meaningful. Our mission today is basically to pull out the most important stuff from this approach, the key insights, and show how it can be, well, a real game changer.
Okay, so we've structured this around 7 key insights to really give everyone a solid handle on it. We're going to look at
Right.
1, just understanding what archetypes are in branding. 2, a deep dive into the 12 core archetypes themselves. 3, how you use this to create authentic brands. 4, leveraging these for emotional connection. 5, using them to stand out differentiation. 6, how brands evolve their archetypes. And finally, 7, looking beyond just branding to the whole company.
That covered the key areas, definitely.
Yeah, so if you've ever wondered why some brands just feel right, you're in the right place. Let's dive straight into that first insight, understanding archetypes, the core of branding strategy.
Okay, so this is really the foundation. Archetypes aren't just like academic ideas. For branding, they're the bedrock. They tap into these universal psychological triggers and cultural stories that we all kind of understand instinctively.
Right.
So when a brand consciously picks and lives an archetype, it gives them some really unique advantages.
Okay, so for someone who's already maybe familiar with other brand strategy frameworks, what's the unique edge here? What does understanding archetypes give you that, say, focusing purely on demographics doesn't?
That's a great point. A lot of frameworks focus on the what, demographics, features, benefits. Archetypes get you to the why. They give you a direct line to the audience's emotional core.
Mm-hmm.
So if you align with a universal desire like the innocent archetype, tapping into the desire for safety and simplicity, you create a connection that's much deeper than just selling a feature. You're speaking to a basic human truth.
Okay, so deeper connection is one. What are some other, maybe more tangible benefits?
No, consistent communication is a big one. When your brand is anchored in a clear archetype, let's say the hero, always telling stories about overcoming obstacles, it creates this really cohesive, instantly recognizable personality.
Right, like the brand always sounds like itself no matter where you encounter it.
Exactly. Every message, every visual, it all reinforces that same core identity.
And in a, such a crowded market, how does this help a brand actually get noticed?
Differentiation.
Hmm.
It's a powerful tool for that. If everyone else in your space is kind of the reliable, safe, everyman brand, positioning yourself as, say, the rebellious outlaw makes you instantly stand out.
Mm-hmm.
It signals a really distinct identity
Mm-hmm.
and attracts people who resonate with that particular worldview.
Okay, so that makes sense. Now, what happens if a brand doesn't think about this? If they kind of ignore this whole archetype layer? What are the pitfalls?
The most common issue is just a lack of resonance.
Yeah.
Your brand might feel a bit, well, generic. It doesn't really evoke strong emotions or feel familiar.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of brand where people might get what you do, but they don't really feel why they should care.
Yeah, that indifference, that's brutal for a brand, isn't it? What else can go wrong?
Inconsistent messaging is another big one. Without that archetypal anchor, your communication can feel all over the place.
Hmm.
Maybe you try to be sophisticated one day, then really down to earth the next, with no clear thread connecting it. That just confuses people. They don't get a clear sense of what your brand actually stands for.
Right, like a character who keeps changing their personality mid-story. It's hard to follow. And the final sort of consequence of ignoring this.
Just difficulty standing out.
Yeah.
Simple as that. In today's markets, if you don't have a clear archetypal identity, you risk just blending into the noise.
Mm-hmm.
You lack that distinct personality, that point of view that grabs attention and makes you memorable. You're just another face in the crowd.
Okay, so we see the why. Let's look at the how. How do successful U.S. companies actually put this into practice? What are the key strategies?
Well, a fundamental one is identifying their core values first.
Mm.
They really dig into what they believe, their mission, and then they pick an archetype that genuinely lines up with those inherent qualities.
Okay.
So a brand focused on, say, community building might naturally align with the everyman or maybe the lover archetype.
Ugh. That feels like it builds in authenticity from the start. What's another strategy?
Consistent integration. This is crucial. It's not just about picking one. Successful brands weave it into everything.
Right.
Visuals, logo, colors, messaging, website experience, social media, even customer service. It's got to be holistic.
So it's not just the ads, it's baked into the whole experience.
Precisely. And third, narrative development. They craft compelling stories around their brand that embody the traits and themes of their chosen archetype. You know, those brands that feel like they're inviting you into a story, not just selling you something. That's often archetype-driven storytelling.
Okay. And on the flip side, what mistakes do you see from competitors who aren't doing this effectively?
Superficial branding is pretty common. They might try to jump on a trendy archetype. Maybe they see creators popular, but without really understanding its depth or if it even fits their brand. The result feels forced, kind of hollow. All style, no substance.
Yeah, like wearing a costume that just doesn't fit.
Exactly. Another one is a confusing brand image. Without that guiding archetype, they can send out mixed signals, maybe even contradictory messages. It just dilutes their identity and leaves people scratching their heads.
Right. And the final common misstep.
Weak customer loyalty. If you don't build that deeper emotional connection that archetypes help foster, relationships often stay purely transactional, and transactional relationships are easily broken.
Okay, so for our listener who's maybe building a brand or wants to strengthen one, what's the practical takeaway from this first principle? How do they start using this?
It really starts with honest self-reflection.
Mhm.
You need to dig deep. What are your core values? What problem are you really solving? What feeling do you want people to consistently associate with your brand? Once you've got that clarity, then you can explore the 12 core archetypes, which we'll get into next, and see which one genuinely resonates with your brand's DNA.
Yeah.
Like that outdoor gear example, is it about mastery, hero, or discovery, explorer? And then the crucial next step is weaving it consistently into everything. Logo, website, social media, customer interactions. It all needs to speak the same archetypal language. Consistency is just absolutely key.
Absolutely. Getting that foundation right, the brand essence, and its genuine archetypal match seems critical. Okay, let's move to insight number 2. The 12 core archetypes, a deep dive. This is where we meet the cast of characters, so to speak.
Exactly. Knowing the full range of these 12 archetypes gives you a much richer strategic palette. You have more colors to paint with when shaping your brand's identity and position.
Okay, so what are the specific advantages of getting familiar with all 12, beyond just having more options?
Well, as you said, broader strategic palette is one. You might see possibilities you hadn't considered, but it also allows for much more nuanced brand development.
How so?
Each archetype has its own specific motivations, fears, desires. Understanding these lets you craft a more targeted and resonant identity. You can move beyond broad strokes to really fine-tune the message.
Okay, more precision. And what's the third main benefit?
It sharpens your competitive analysis. When you know the 12, you start seeing them everywhere. You can identify which archetypes your competitors are using, consciously or not.
Ah, interesting.
And that can reveal gaps. Maybe everyone in finance is the sage or the ruler, right? Trustworthy, stable. Maybe there's an opening for a hero brand, empowering people to take control. It gives you a strategic lens on the market.
Okay, so knowing the 12 gives you that strategic edge. What about the downsides? What if you don't really grasp the full set?
Well, you limit your options. For one, you might just default to a really common archetype, like the everyman, or one that doesn't quite fit, just because you don't know the others. Your brand could end up feeling bland.
Yeah, like playing the same few chords over and over.
Right, and you might miss connection opportunities. Each archetype hits different emotional triggers. If you don't know them, you might be failing to connect with people who'd be really drawn to, say, a magician or a jester archetype. You're leaving potential connections untapped.
Okay. And the third potential issue?
Accidental alignment issues. You might inadvertently project traits of an archetype you don't want. Maybe you're aiming for sophisticated ruler. But without understanding the nuances, you come across as aloof or arrogant.
That could backfire. So how do successful companies use their knowledge of these 12 archetypes effectively?
A key strategy is picking one that really resonates with their target audience's own aspirations. So if you're targeting adventurers, you consciously embody the explorer, speaking directly to their desire for freedom and discovery. It's very customer-centric, but on a deeper psychological level.
Speaking their unspoken language, what's another, maybe more advanced strategy?
Sometimes they subtly blend elements. While you usually have one dominant archetype, some brands weave in secondary characteristics for depth.
Okay.
But the key is subtly. You don't want to dilute the main message. So maybe a primary caregiver brand adds touches of the sage to emphasize expertise and trust.
Adding layers without confusing people. And the third strategy.
Archetype-driven content creation. Everything they put out, social posts, blogs, videos, even product design, speaks to the desires and motivations of their chosen archetype.
Right.
A jester brand uses humor. A sage brand offers wisdom. It makes their communication much more focused and engaging.
Okay. And the mistakes competitors make here when they don't have this nuanced understanding.
A mismatch between archetype and audience is a big one. Picking an archetype that just doesn't click with the people they want to reach, their marketing falls flat because
Oh.
there's a fundamental disconnect.
Like trying to sell, I don't know, high fashion using the everyman archetype.
Exactly, or a superficial application. They might use some keywords or visuals linked to an archetype, but they don't truly embody its values. It feels inauthentic, like putting on a costume instead of living the character.
And the final mistake in this area.
Creating generic content,
Yeah.
just bland stuff. Without that clear archetypal focus, their content has no distinct point of view. It doesn't really speak to anyone emotionally. It's just noise.
Okay, so for our listener wanting to use this palette of 12 archetypes, what's the guidance?
First step is really get to know them all. The innocent safety, orphan everyman belonging, hero mastery, caregiver protection, explorer freedom, rebel outlaw liberation, lover intimacy, creator innovation, juster joy, sage truth, magician transformation, and ruler control. Understand their core desire, fear, goal. Start noticing them in brands around you like Dove is innocent, Harley is outlaw. Then think deeply about your ideal customer. What drives them? What do they aspire to?
Right.
Finally, match your brand's mission and values to the archetype that best mirrors those customer traits. And, like we said, look beyond the obvious. A tech company empowering small businesses, maybe they're the hero, not just the predictable magician.
That's a really useful way to frame it, these archetypes as fundamental human drives. Okay, let's move to insight number 3. Creating authentic brands through archetypal strategy. Because just picking one isn't enough, right? You have to be it.
Exactly. In today's world, with transparency being so high, authenticity is everything. Choosing an archetype is step one, but genuinely living it in everything you do, that's what builds trust. Consumers can sniff out fakeness pretty quickly.
So what are the concrete benefits when a brand really achieves this authentic archetypal expression?
Stronger customer trust is number one. When a brand truly lives its archetype, it feels genuine, reliable. People sense when your actions match your words and your stated personality. And trust is just foundational for any lasting relationship.
Absolutely. And once you have that trust,
Increased brand loyalty follows naturally. Those deeper emotional connections rooted in authenticity create much stronger loyalty. People stick with brands they feel they know and trust, brands that reflect their own values. It goes way beyond just buying stuff.
and that loyal base often translates into what for the brand itself.
An improved brand reputation. Authentic brands are just more resilient. They can handle bumps in the road better because they built up that goodwill. A good reputation is priceless today.
Okay, let's flip it again. What happens when that authenticity is missing? When the archetype feels like a mask?
Well, the immediate risk is being seen as inauthentic. Consumers are savvy, they're skeptical. They can often tell when a brand's trying too hard or faking it. Being seen as manipulative or disingenuous, that's incredibly damaging.
And once that perception takes hold,
Erosion of trust is almost inevitable. If you claim to be the caregiver, but your customer support is terrible, or the hero, but your practices are unethical, you break that promise.
right,
Trust is damaged,
right.
and it's really hard to win back.
And the long-term result of lacking authenticity.
You fail to build real connections. It stays superficial, transactional, and those relationships are fragile. Easy for a competitor with a better offer or a more genuine field to steal your customers.
Okay, so how do the successful companies ensure they are authentic in their archetypal strategy?
Internal alignment is key. They make sure their company culture, how they treat employees, their business practices, all genuinely reflect the chosen archetype. A caregiver brand will likely have strong employee support. A creator brand might foster internal innovation. It's living it from the inside out.
So it's not just a marketing layer, it's in the company's DNA.
Exactly. Another crucial piece is consistency in brand voice and visuals across all touch points. website, social packaging, it all has to feel cohesive and believable
And how do they really show that authenticity?
by living the brand values through their actions. A hero brand might champion ethical sourcing. An explorer brand might fund conservation efforts. Actions speak way louder than slogans.
And the pitfalls for competitors who struggle with this authenticity piece.
Superficial marketing claims are a big one. Greenwashing, talking about being eco-friendly without actually changing anything significant. Consumers see right through that discrepancy.
It's a betrayal of trust, really.
Precisely. Another is an inconsistent customer experience. The ads promise one thing, maybe a fun gesture vibe, but interacting with the company is bureaucratic and frustrating. That breaks the brand promise immediately.
And the third common misstep here.
Lack of internal buy-in. If your own employees don't understand or connect with the brand's archetype, how can they project it authentically? They're your front line. If they don't believe it, it shows.
Okay, so for our listener who's really committed to building an authentic brand, what's the core advice regarding archetypes?
Authenticity isn't a tactic, it's a principle. Make sure your operations, your culture, your leadership all genuinely align with your archetype. You have to walk the talk.
Right.
Use storytelling not just to sell, but to show how your brand lives its values, how it embodies that archetype in real, tangible ways. Actions and stories together build that authentic perception.
That's a powerful point. Authenticity is the absolute bedrock. Okay, let's move to Insight 4. Emotional connections, leveraging archetypes to engage customers. This is where we get into the feeling side of things.
Absolutely. Archetypes are like emotional shortcuts. They tap directly into core human desires and feelings. By embodying the right one, your brand can create these really profound emotional connections that go beyond just function or price.
So what are the main benefits of using archetypes specifically to forge these emotional bonds?
Well, first, it creates resonance with those core human desires. We've touched on this. But when your brand aligns with something fundamental, like the explorer tapping into freedom, customers feel understood. There's this sense of recognition, like, this brand gets me.
That feeling of being gotten is huge for loyalty.
Huge. Which leads to the second benefit, stronger brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Emotional connections create much deeper, stickier loyalty. People aren't just buying a product. They're buying into a feeling, a value system. They become advocates.
And those advocates then do what for the brand?
They amplify it. That's the third benefit, increased engagement. Brands that connect emotionally through archetypes tend to have audiences that pay more attention, share more, participate more. They're invested.
Okay. Now, what about brands that fail to leverage this? What are the consequences of not building those emotional bridges?
Mostly, you end up with transactional relationships. It's all about price, convenience, features. There's no deeper hook, making those relationships really vulnerable.
And those transactional ties make it hard to do what?
Hard to build lasting loyalty. Customers will easily switch if a competitor offers a slightly better deal or a newer feature. There's no emotional reason to stay.
And what big opportunity do these brands miss?
They miss out on advocacy, that powerful word-of-mouth marketing. Emotionally connected customers want to tell others about brands they love. If you don't build that connection, you lose out on that free, highly credible marketing.
Okay. So how do the successful companies actually do this? How do they use archetypes to generate emotion?
Archetype-driven storytelling campaigns are a major way. They create ads and content that tell stories aligned with their archetype, designed to evoke specific feelings. Think Nike and the hero archetype inspiring courage, determination.
Right. It's not just about the shoes. It's about the feeling of achieving something.
Exactly. Another strategy is consistent archetypal messaging across all platforms. Reinforcing that emotional connection over time, building a cohesive emotional narrative everywhere the customer encounters the brand.
And the third way they build these emotional links.
Creating archetypal brand experiences, designing the entire interaction from website to store to customer service to align with the archetype's feeling. Think Disney and the Magician Innocent, creating experiences filled with wonder and joy.
Okay. And the mistakes competitors make when they don't connect emotionally.
Generic, unaspiring advertising is a big one, just listing features. No story, no feeling. It might inform, but doesn't move anyone.
Informative but forgettable.
Precisely. Also, inconsistent messaging. If the emotional tone keeps shifting, it's hard for customers to form a stable emotional connection. It feels fragmented.
And the third common failure here.
Ignoring customer emotions altogether. Focusing only on the rational, functional stuff and completely missing the underlying human needs and desires that really drive decisions.
Okay, so for our listener wanting to forge those vital emotional connections, what's the key advice?
Become a storyteller. Craft narratives that genuinely hit the emotional notes of your chosen archetype. If you're the lover, tell stories of connection. If you're the jester, use humor to create joy.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, it's not just ads. Ensure every interaction reinforces that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, invite customers into the story. Make them feel like they belong, that their emotions matter to the brand.
That's crucial, remembering the human element in all this. Okay, let's move to Insight 5, differentiation and market positioning, standing out with archetypes. This is about carving out your unique space.
Exactly. In today's ridiculously crowded markets, being distinct isn't a nice to have, it's survival. Archetypes offer a really powerful way to create a clear, memorable position in people's minds. They help answer why choose us.
Okay, so what are the primary benefits of using archetypes specifically for differentiation and positioning?
Well, the most obvious is a clearer brand identity. When you consistently embody an archetype, you become easier to understand, remember, and prefer. You cut through the noise.
Becoming the signal and the static.
Right. Secondly, stronger market resonance. When your archetype aligns with the values and self-perception of your target audience, you connect on a much deeper, almost instinctual level. You attract the right people who just get you.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, in a competitive context, this leads to
A real competitive advantage.
Hmm.
A clear archetypal position makes you stand out from competitors who might be more generic or less defined.
Yeah.
You become the choice for those who resonate with your specific story.
Okay. Now, what are the risks for brands that don't use archetypes effectively for differentiation?
The biggest risk is just lack of distinctiveness, blending in,
Mm.
being perceived as generic. And in a world of infinite choice, being forgettable is deadly.
Yeah, like being invisible in the marketplace.
Pretty much. Another issue is difficulty attracting a loyal base. People are drawn to brands that represent something. Without that deeper meaning provided by an archetype, it's hard to build loyalty beyond just the product itself.
Mm-hmm. And without that loyalty, you're more vulnerable too.
Price wars. If you're not differentiated by identity and emotion, you often end up competing mainly on price, which is usually a race to the bottom.
Okay, so how do successful U.S. companies actually use archetypes to differentiate and position themselves so effectively?
One smart strategy is picking an archetype to fill a market gap. They look for unmet needs or desires and choose an archetype that speaks directly to that gap. Think about how Apple initially positioned itself as the creator outlaw against the more ruler-like IBM.
Mm-hmm. Offering a different identity, not just a different computer.
Exactly. Another strategy is developing a narrative that emphasizes their archetypal uniqueness, telling stories that highlight why they are different based on their archetype's values. Harley-Davidson isn't just selling motorcycles, they're selling rebellion, freedom, the outlaw story.
Clearly articulating why you're different and who that's for.
Right. And third, consistent reinforcement across all brand elements. Visuals, messaging, product design, service, everything hammers home that core archetypal position, creating an unmistakable brand signature.
Okay. And the mistakes competitors make here, those who fail to differentiate using archetypes.
Me too. Branding is very common. Just copying the category leader without developing their own unique identity or archetypal voice. They just become a pale imitation.
Offering no real reason to switch.
Exactly. Also, inconsistent messaging again. Without that guiding archetype, their marketing feels scattered, lacking a central theme that sets them apart.
Mm-hmm. And the third major misstep.
Failing to connect with specific consumer desires. Offering a product, sure, but not tapping into the deeper motivations or archetypal longings that would make their brand the ideal choice for a particular group.
Okay, so for our listener looking to carve out their own distinct market space, what's the key advice on using archetypes for differentiation?
First, nail down your unique value proposition, what makes you genuinely different. Then explore the archetypes and see which one best amplifies that difference and resonates with your ideal customer's core desires.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to be distinct, even niche. Strong archetypes build fierce loyalty. And finally, ensure every single brand touchpoint consistently reinforces that chosen position. Consistency makes the differentiation stick.
That's really practical advice for making a brand not just visible, but memorable. Okay, insight number 6, brand evolution, adapting archetypes over time. Because things change, right?
Absolutely. The market shifts, culture evolves, consumers change. Successful brands know they can't stay frozen in time. While the core archetype often remains, how it's expressed might need to adapt to stay relevant.
So, what are the benefits for a brand that can skillfully adapt its archetypal expression over time?
Maintaining relevance is the big one. By tweaking how they express their archetype in response to change, brands avoid feeling dated or out of touch. They stay current while keeping their soul.
Like a classic story retold for a new generation, what's another benefit?
Attracting new audiences without alienating the old ones. By subtly shifting or broadening their archetypal appeal, they can connect with new segments while still feeling familiar enough to keep their loyal base. It's a balancing act.
Expanding reach without losing your core, and the ultimate strategic advantage.
Sustained competitive edge. Brands that can evolve their archetypal expression are better equipped to navigate change, respond to trends, and keep resonating long-term. They stay ahead of the curve.
Okay. And the risks for brands that resist this evolution, that stay too rigid.
Well, the biggest risk is becoming irrelevant, outdated. Clinging to an expression that no longer connects with modern consumers, they just lose touch.
Yeah, like a character who never learns or grows throughout a long story.
Exactly. Another consequence is often loss of market share. If competitors adapt better to consumer needs, the rigid brand gets left behind. Customers drift away to more relevant options.
Mm-hmm. And the long-term impact of that kind of stagnation.
Stifled growth. A static identity limits opportunities for expansion, new products, new markets. It puts a ceiling on the brand's potential.
So how do the smart companies approach this adaptation strategically?
Constantly monitoring trends and consumer feedback is crucial. Listening to the market, understanding cultural shifts. This gives them clues about when and how they might need to evolve their expression.
So informed adjustments, not just random changes. What's another approach?
Gradual integration of new elements. Rather than sudden, jarring shifts, they often subtly introduce new facets to their archetype story. Think Coca-Cola keeping its innocent core, but adding elements of connection and shared moments over time. It's evolution, not revolution.
A smooth transition. And the third strategy for successful evolution.
Responding to broader societal shifts. Being sensitive to changing cultural values and adapting their archetype's message accordingly. A hero brand might shift focus from purely individual achievement to include social responsibility, reflecting changing societal expectations.
Okay. And the mistakes competitors make when they fail to evolve.
Ignoring the signals is a big one. Just failing to see or respond to market shifts. Sticking their head in the sand while the world changes around them.
Clinging to the past.
Right. Another is making abrupt, confusing changes. Suddenly shifting archetype or messaging can alienate loyal customers and confuse everyone else. It feels like a betrayal of the brand's identity.
Mm-hmm. And the third mistake.
Just sticking rigidly to outdated expressions, using language, imagery, or themes that simply don't resonate anymore, even if they worked perfectly 20 years ago.
Okay, so for our listener thinking about the long-term health of their brand, what's the key advice on adapting their archetype?
Stay agile. Listen constantly to your audience, to the culture. Regularly check if your archetype's expression still feels relevant and resonant.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, evolution is usually gradual, building on your existing equity. And be aware of those larger societal shifts. Adapt your messaging to stay meaningful. Think about how Netflix evolved from purely explore, access anywhere, to also encompass creator, original content.
That's a great point about staying agile and responsive. Okay, finally, our seventh insight. Beyond branding, the broader impact of archetypal strategy, taking it beyond just marketing.
Exactly. The real power kicks in when the archetype isn't just a marketing concept, but informs the entire organization. Internal culture, leadership, strategy, everything. That creates true coherence.
Okay, so what are the benefits of extending this thinking across the whole company?
Well, a more cohesive organizational culture is a huge one. When everyone understands and ideally embodies the brand's archetype, it fosters consistent values and behaviors. There's a shared identity.
A unified internal feel. What's another advantage?
Aligned leadership. Leaders who genuinely embody the archetype inspire more trust and engagement. Their actions feel authentic to the brand's mission. They lead by example.
Mm-hmm. And when culture and leadership are aligned like that?
You get strategic coherence. The archetype becomes a guiding principle for decisions across the board. Product development, customer service, operations. Everyone's pulling in the same direction, guided by a clear vision.
Okay. Now, what happens when companies don't do this? When the archetype stays stuck in the marketing department?
Internal disconnect is common. The external image doesn't match the internal reality. Employees might not feel connected to the brand's supposed values, leading to disengagement and that feeling of inauthenticity we talked about.
The say-do gap again, but internally.
Right. Another consequence is an inconsistent customer experience. If employees don't understand or embody the archetype, their interactions with customers won't reflect the intended brand personality. It feels disjointed.
Mm-hmm. And the third negative outcome.
Lack of unified direction. Different departments might have conflicting priorities or values because there's no shared archetypal framework guiding them. This leads to inefficiency and internal friction.
Okay, so how do the successful companies actually integrate the archetype throughout the organization?
Integrating it into employee training and onboarding is key. Teaching everyone the brand's archetype, its values, and how it should inform their behavior and interactions. Embedding the brand's soul.
Teaching the brand's way of being, not just the job. What else?
Leadership development based on the archetype. Encouraging leaders to embody those values in their style and decisions. Cultivating leadership that truly reflects the brand's identity from the top.
Leading with purpose. And the third key strategy.
Using the archetype as a guide for internal communication and decision-making. It becomes a filter. Does this initiative align with our caregiver values? Does this policy reflect our explorer spirit? It ensures strategic alignment.
Okay. And the mistakes competitors make when they fail to take this holistic view.
Siloed branding efforts. Marketing creates a great archetype story, but it's not reflected anywhere else. Operations, sales, service, they're all doing their own thing. The promise doesn't match the delivery.
The orchestra isn't playing from the same sheet music.
Exactly. Disengaged employees are another result. They don't feel connected because the archetype isn't lived internally, and customers can feel that lack of passion.
Mm-hmm. And the final misstep.
Inconsistent brand delivery. Customers get different experiences depending on who they talk to because there's no shared understanding of the brand's core archetypal personality guiding those interactions.
Okay, so for our listener aiming for that deep organizational alignment, what's the final takeaway on the broader impact of archetypes?
Make the archetype a guiding principle for the whole organization, not just a marketing tool. Communicate it clearly internally. Explain its influence. Encourage leaders to embody it. Use it as a lens for strategic decisions. This creates a powerful, authentic brand that resonates deeply, not just with customers, but with your own team, too. It fosters purpose and drives real success.
That's a really powerful way to think about it, the archetype as the soul of the entire organization. Okay, so to wrap up our deep dive, we've explored these 7 key insights from the world of archetypal branding, drawing heavily on the hero and the outlaw. It's really clear that understanding and truly living your brand's archetype is fundamental for connection, for differentiation, for building a resilient and resonant business.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, as you think about all this, maybe take a fresh look at brands you admire, or even your own brand. Try to identify the archetype at play. And then ask yourself, how consistently is it expressed? Not just in ads, but in their products, their service, maybe even their internal culture. What does that tell you about the power of a truly integrated archetypal strategy?
That's excellent food for thought, a great lens to apply to the world of brands around us. Well, thank you for taking this deep dive with us into such a fascinating topic.
My pleasure. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. Until our next exploration. All right, so you're here because you want to get under the hood of what makes some brands just understand how they connect so deeply without wading through tons of, dense marketing theory.
Exactly.
Today, we're cutting straight to it. We are diving deep into archetypal branding, mostly pulling from Margaret Mark and Carol S. Pearson's book, The Hero and the Outlaw. Think of this as like a shortcut to understanding these really powerful, universal stories and how smart brands use them to connect.
Yeah, it's a fantastic framework. Archetypal branding, at its core, is really about deliberately using these timeless human patterns. The quest for freedom, wanting to belong, seeking change, and weaving them into your brand's story and personality.
So tapping into something already there, basically.
Exactly. Something deep in our collective psychology. It helps build brands that just feel familiar, meaningful. Our mission today is basically to pull out the most important stuff from this approach, the key insights, and show how it can be, well, a real game changer.
Okay, so we've structured this around 7 key insights to really give everyone a solid handle on it. We're going to look at 1, just understanding what archetypes are in branding. 2, a deep dive into the 12 core archetypes themselves. 3, how you use this to create authentic brands. 4, leveraging these for emotional connection. 5, using them to stand out differentiation. 6, how brands evolve their archetypes. And finally, 7, looking beyond just branding to the whole company.
I covered the key areas, definitely.
Yeah, so if you've ever wondered why some brands just feel right, You're in the right place. Let's dive straight into that first insight, understanding archetypes, the core of branding strategy.
Okay, so this is really the foundation. Archetypes aren't just like academic ideas. For branding, they're the bedrock. They tap into these universal psychological triggers and cultural stories that we all kind of understand instinctively.
Right.
So when a brand consciously picks and lives an archetype, it gives them some really unique advantages.
Okay, so for someone who's already maybe familiar with other brand strategy frameworks, what's the unique edge here? What does understanding archetypes give you that, say, focusing purely on demographics doesn't?
That's a great point. A lot of frameworks focus on the what, demographics, features, benefits. Archetypes get you to the why. They give you a direct